Oh my goodness, from our home studios this week in Los Angeles and Tampa. This is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. This week, I just returned from the Theme Entertainment Association's Inspire Week and their leadership forum. And Scott, I have two big takeaways. The first takeaway is that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people in our industry are not really sure what to do about it. And the second is that Universal really is diversifying with their new entertainment offerings. And we got more details about how they plan to capture more of their local markets.
Since I wasn't there, my response to that is, duh. Second, I'm glad to hear that because we've hinted at that in previous shows with their expansion to the family park, the full-time year-round horror experience, that they really are diversifying their portfolio and reaching out to different audiences. We can go into a little more depth in this show, and you can explain what you discovered while you were at the TEA. What was this one, Inspire?
Yeah, now it's called the Inspire Week because day one is a leadership forum. And then at the same time as that leadership forum is the stories from the fringes. And then it's the 2 days of case studies for the Thea recipients as it has been in the past. And then there is the Thea Gala, which caps it off. A lot of this I'm kind of extrapolating from conversations I had with a lot of the leaders during the leadership forum, which is what the forum is for, to sit around and talk to other executives in the space. They do have sessions that are planned, and none of the planned sessions had anything to do with, in my opinion, what the problems were, which are tariffs and uncertainty in markets.
To a certain extent, though, I think that that's because, as you've mentioned, there is such uncertainty, and the
Yes.
tariffs are coming and going and rising and lowering, and
Yep.
they're being made up as we go along. So it's sort of like, 10 years ago when someone came in and said, yes, I'm coming in as a social media expert, and we'd all go, yeah, right. So, they don't know what to say. I think that's the reason there's no platform for it. They can only set up panels on things they can actually discuss.
I think that is a great insight, and I think it echoes exactly what the challenge is also for IAPA, because IAPA put out a statement this past week in their newsletter where new tariffs raise attractions industry concerns. New tariffs on Mexican, Canadian, and Chinese products may have global implications. These could lead to less spending on leisure travel and shifts in vacation choices. Steel and aluminum tariffs could also impact manufacturers and suppliers. IAPA supports policies that foster innovation and economic growth. IAPA will monitor the situation, provide updates, and develop new member resources. So I'm combining that with the conversations that I had with the executives and operators. In those conversations, they did give a little bit more insight as to a lot of the hotel operators saying that their business travel is completely nosedive, down 80%. A lot of the industry publications in our space have seen also 80% reduction in ad sales because people don't know what to advertise because they're not sure about the future. So there's all these concrete disruptions that I did hear about from the executives. There's a lot of disruptions, a lot of crazy. And to your point, people are not sure what to do, but a few themes emerged. What do you do in this situation? You diversify your revenue to focus on local markets and look at international markets. And I think that's exactly what Universal has been doing. Although, to be clear, Universal did not explicitly draw that connection at any point. Like no one explicitly did. I'm saying, based on my analysis, the only things people could think of as solutions are to do with your local market and also to look at international markets.
A couple things that we have to take into consideration here. I agree with you. I think the IAPA's statement is pretty much a, hey, we have a problem and we'll monitor it, which is in essence what they're saying here. I don't want to say looking back into the industry because I'm still part of the industry. Consultants are becoming more and more a part of the industry once again. What I'm seeing is not only is it we don't know exactly whether this is really going to happen or to what extent it's going to happen or how quickly it's going to happen or who's going to implement it once it does happen. And once it does happen, is it going to then become immediately illegal? We don't know any of that. We don't know any of that at this point. I'm signing an executive order. That's a piece of paper. What that doesn't actually show how it's going to happen, who's going to pay for it, and will they actually be able to make it happen, go directly against either the United States Constitution or other laws that are already in place. So that's part of the reason that there's this confusion right now. These statements have to be so incredibly basic is because we are polarized right now. No matter what you say, one side or both are going to take offense to it. So pretty much all you can do is state the facts. Tariffs are going to impact us, and we will keep an eye on this.
Yep.
Addressing the issue, but by addressing the fact that it exists, because no one knows what's going to happen. And anybody who is 100% on one side of the fence or the other is delusional, because there's absolutely no way of knowing in the industry. Now, we can make predictions, and I think, as you say, diversification, that's always the answer. That was the answer during COVID. That was the answer during 9/11. That was the answer. Anytime there is a catastrophe, and yes, I'm calling these tariffs a catastrophe, anytime we have that situation where there is something that is going to threaten the way we do business, diversification is the answer. I started saying many years ago, don't panic, just pivot. I started that 10 years ago when my career changed. It was, don't panic, just pivot. But you have to have a place to pivot to. The other thing that we've talked about is be prepared for the next catastrophe. Post-crisis leadership taught us, have parallel paths, keep parallel approaches going. And that is, in essence, diversification, whether it's diversification of product, vendors, or supply chain in general. I think these all make sense, but I'm going to be completely honest. And I think what's really happening is no one knows what's going to happen, so they're falling back on what is comfortable. They're falling back on what they know is true,
Yep.
And that diversification is always a good idea when there's any sort of crisis.
I think we also see exactly that in real-time strategies, because we talked a lot previously comparing the earnings, and we were like, oh, Disney is more diversified, so they're in a better position. But to your point, they haven't fundamentally done anything that they haven't done before, if that makes sense. You talk about the Disney flywheel forever, and it's like they're really just doing stuff in the Disney flywheel, like versus Universal, who is doing things that they've honestly never done before in the way they're doing them. But then we have like Six Flags over there where we're not even sure what they're doing, because, and then United Parks,
they're sure what they're doing.
Correct.
And United Parks is just trying to stay out of court.
I think in all these you see this thing. But to your point, it's like I did get the sense that people were not even sure where to diversify to. The target is moving so quickly because we have no rules to follow here, except that there are no rules.
Well, and I think that, I made it, my little tirade there, I think made it sound like I was frustrated. No, I just want to clarify, diversification is exactly the right choice. I just don't think it's anything particularly groundbreaking. I think it's the safest thing we can do in a situation where there are no rules, no absolutes. We've just got to figure out, what do we do if? And unfortunately, unlike the pandemic, or unlike what 9/11 did to tourism, this one is even more vague, because there's no clear-cut right or wrong. There's no clear-cut enemy to unify against. It's hard because it's a bunch of muck thrown into the air. That's about all I can equate it to. Of course, I'm very visual. So when we continue to stir up stuff, I just got a new fish tank. When you stir up the fish poop so you can't see anything, you just don't know where to go. That's what's happening right now. There's my fish poop metaphor. Enjoy that one, folks.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that. I think when you don't know where to go, maybe placing small bets on different locations is at least a strategy.
It is a strategy, and it's a very common strategy. It's go to ground, go to your safe place, and that comfort zone. And sometimes by finding that comfort zone, it may mean not the comfort zone in the same place, because you don't know quite where the poop's going to land. You don't know quite where you're going to lose your profitability. So you got to make sure that you've got a comfort spot in the world of family friendly and local. You've got a comfort spot in the world of horror. You're Universal, and you've made a huge brand out of that.
That's a great segue into going over what we learned from Universal during the TEA Inspire Week. We did learn a lot more about their specific plans. Their bet with Horror Unleashed, the local kids family thing, which is the park in Texas, and tapping into other fandoms or convention vibe or convention-ness, which is the FanFest Nights. And so we did have panels on the different items. Let's talk about some of the things we learned. During the Inspire the Night event, we went all into the theater, and there was a panel presentation from Universal. And during that panel presentation, they discussed FanFest Nights, among other things, but the FanFest Nights piqued my interest because it gave us more context that we didn't have from the press release. And they basically said the term North Star, which I was thinking of Scott during that, but they basically...
Sometimes the old guy gets it, occasionally people remember what he said back when he was a youngster.
They did say that the North Star of FanFest Nights was fan first and authentic. They mean both authentic to the brand, but also to Universal? Like, does this feel like Universal? And also, is it fan first? They started brainstorming this event 3 years ago, and it was born on the legacy of Halloween Horror Nights. They wanted to capture the elusive spring event, which is right. And this all makes sense, right? You're like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. So the concept for these is story-based pulsed attractions where groups go in together to solve different challenges together. They do expect the nights to be different because each one is a particular fandom. And one night you might get more One Piece fans versus Back to the Future fans. They're unsure about the staffing. That needs to be more flexible because you're going to have to scale up or scale down particular areas depending on the nightly demand. They also discuss their intention to send this model out to other properties with tweaking for local markets. They said that these experiences are going to be longer than HHN scenes. And so the scope is larger, which was more challenging for their operational team. It's the highest level of detail we've ever done for live entertainment. They're also trying a little bit of spaghetti approach. They are experimenting, bringing in the movie set from Star Trek for people to be in. Each experience is almost like a different test. They have the whole movie thing where you get to see the prop interact. They have the HHN-esque style where there's a walkthrough, except it's more like group escape room type of thing. And then they have the more large scale immersive LARPing experience, which is the Back to the Future thing. And then they have what they're calling a fan zone concept for One Piece, where fans can just hang out in a zone where different characters will come and interact with you. So, and then they did confirm that the Jujutsu Kaisen 4D theater experience is the same one that they debuted at USJ. They're bringing it over to their 4D theater, which I think it's brilliant because you already have it. You've created this asset. It's already done. You have also a 4D theater here. Let's just bring it over. It's a good way to activate a space and put something in there that is unique when you already have created the asset.
What's the phrase we use all the time? Cross-utilization of assets? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great.
So hearing all these details, I'm much more optimistic about this event, and also hearing that they're understanding so much of it is a test. Sometimes there's not a North Star for projects, but hearing that there's a North Star, hearing they have longer plans, hearing specifically what they're thinking about and how they're thinking about activating different areas. This is a cross-departmental project. It's not just folks from one park, and it shows their commitment to the diversity across their portfolio.
Well, and I think that they've hit the nail on the head with their North Star when they start with fan first and authentic.
Yep.
Now, we talk about this like these fan nights or FanFest nights or something completely new. They are not.
Yep.
They are not. In fact, Disney was the first major chain to do it, and they used to do soap opera weekends.
They still do. 90s night just happened like last month.
So yeah, they do those things. And part of the reason that I used to go to soap opera weekends here in Orlando all the time, when they first started, they were fan first. Mm-hmm. There were the primary element of that was autograph signings, panel discussions, and because it was in what was then Disney MGM Studios, they had parades with the stars. It was all about the stars because they knew that the fans wanted to meet the soap stars. Yep. When they got away from that is when it started to fade. The same thing happened originally. They tried that same model when they did Star Wars weekends. So that all started with meet the actual people from Star Wars. And then as that petered out, they got less and less popular, quite honestly.
Yep.
So I love the idea that it's fan first. I think as long as they can maintain that, that would be great. And I think that the only way to do that is to continue to find out what do the fans want.
I think maintain the idea of fluctuation. Sometimes when you look at diversifying, this might be what Universal needs now at this point in time, because things are so uncertain and because they're basically looking and saying, where are people spending money? They talked about anime. Los Angeles has the largest anime convention in the country. I go to it every year. It's insane. But the people in that room in Theme Entertainment were like, what is anime? What are you talking about? And they had to explain it. To your point, it might evolve. And part of that evolution might be they don't need it in the future. Maybe in 4 years, you won't need this FanFest event. But at this point in time, I think they're looking at it and saying, what are people willing to spend money on? Clearly anime, especially in Los Angeles, clearly these different IPs. And if we put all these markets together, we can monetize it. That may change in a few years.
And I also think it's important to recognize when you look at these fandoms are not selected randomly. Clearly, I mean, if you just look at it, it legitimizes Universal with a bunch of different demographics without
Yep.
being scattershot, without
Exactly.
saying, we're going to put this out there, we're going to put it all out at the same time, and it just becomes one big muck. Now back to my swirling fish tank. The idea of it here, you've got the anime, which is traditionally a younger demo. I'm not trying to be exclusive, but traditionally a younger, more hip demo, generally speaking, more educated demo, generally speaking. You've got I'll be honest, I did not know what's the One Piece. I did not know until I saw it on TV, and then I started to explore it. Go, TV's nothing.
Yeah.
TV's nothing. One Piece is significantly more
It's massive. Yeah.
robust and massive. And then when I had my art booth at Spooky Empire, I was next to a card dealer. He says, I'm a One Piece card collector. I can't keep them in stock because no matter what I charge for them, people buy them.
Yep.
And so he was like, he had none, but everybody asked about him. So I was like, oh, I felt so hip and cool. But the truth is, at the same time, you've got Back to the Future and Star Trek. These are things that target an older demo. Because, I mean, let's be honest, there are probably anime fans who go, back to the what? I think it's really interesting that they are getting at least a foothold in all these different demographics and legitimizing their overall product to these niche markets, which is so smart. So smart. I also think they're playing into pop-up is going to be king for a while.
Yep.
Because we need a reason to go. We need a fuse to be lit. And to go on a certain night is a specific enough reason for many people to attend.
Yes, let's talk about that, actually. So speaking about that, I think, again, I want to just emphasize here that part of diversifying is taking risks. You can't know ultimately until you put it in the market. Like, you can do all the product testing and all the research you want, but you don't actually know until you hit the ground with it. And exactly to your point, their Universal Horror Unleashed seems like the opposite bet, which I think in a world where where not sure if anything is true, right? That I think is actually a good strategy, to bet on opposite directions, because Horror Unleashed is the opposite of a pop-up. It is, we're going to put this Horror Unleashed facility here and it's going to be open year round, like every day Halloween, and that is in many ways the opposite of a fan fest. It's very temporary.
It started as a pop-up. Halloween Horror Nights started as a limited run, and they have built such a brand. The Halloween Horror Nights has become synonymous with theme park haunted attraction. I can't tell you how many people have said, I'm going to Halloween Horror Nights. Oh, which one? The one at Busch Gardens or the one at Universal? So it's become the Kleenex. It's a brand name that has taken over the genre. I agree with you in the fact that this is a very wise approach. What they're doing is they're taking a proven concept and doubling down on that while simultaneously opening up the exploration and experimentation of the FanFest Nights to see what the next one's going to be.
To give some details, we learned a lot more. There was a panel in the stories from the Fringes section about Horror Unleashed where we learned a lot more about what they're planning from a business model standpoint for Horror Unleashed. I wrote an extensive 2,500 word article about this that I'll link to in the show note. Of course I did. I even modeled out what I think is the profitability marker for this. I'm more optimistic about this project, but still not convinced about its sustainability. But good on Universal for trying. And again, they did underscore exactly what you said. They kind of are like, look, this is a huge event. It's like our 13th month of revenue. It's a good place to start. And Vegas is a good market to start in, maybe. Universal Horror Unleashed is a new 100,000 square foot warehouse that's going to have 4 haunted houses tied to IPs: Universal Monsters, The Exorcist Believer, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Scarecrow the Reaping. There's also going to be themed bars, food stalls, and a theater or like a show, some sort of show section where they're going to have like Cirque style shows that are going to be there. So what we learned that's new about this place is that some of the bars are going to double as scare zones. They're going to have some safe spaces because nobody wants to wear a martini. They're also going to have some places where there is more of a scare zone aspect to it. But overall, 2 things that we learned about this panel that we had not previously really heard much about, which was my biggest doubts. And so they kind of address them, which is like, one, basically, how is this going to be different? And there was actually a few people that asked that question almost exactly, like, how is this going to be different from Halloween Horror Nights? Or why would I go here versus Horror Nights, whatever? And the 2 things they said is, 1, continuous immersion, and 2, it's an evolving experience. By continuous immersion, I believe what they're trying to convey is that once you enter, it's all going to be encompassed in this horror thing. So it's not like the theme park where you're walking from zone to zone. There might be a roller coaster in the way. You're gonna it's everything around you, everywhere you look, it's going to be a set that's going to all be, somehow related to the overarching story in some way, and then all the zones are going to be connected. So it's not really like once you enter, you're inside and it's this giant continuous immersion. And they also talked about evolving experiences, which they had not previously disclosed, but essentially they did admit on here they are going to be rotating the IPs. And the way they built this is similar to HHN. They're built to be more sturdy so they can be up for longer because they're not temporary buildings, but they are built like black boxes where they can rotate sets and IPs. They do plan on rotating IPs. They also intend on doing seasonal festivals and overlays and have a rotating entertainment piece. And they also talked about creating more adult immersive experiences because it is a different market and they're going to have shows that will be competing with Cirque style shows where the performers will be able to do things with you that they couldn't get away with at a theme park, but they can do it here because it's a different demo and because they're going to have more time with you. There's going to be less conga lines and it's going to be kind of like a haunt dream experience.
In essence, they're taking all the things that they learned from being able to put up haunted houses in sound stages, and they're going to apply it here. Whether you call it a black box or a big sound stage, they're pretty much the same thing. They have learned, and this way they don't have to rent the sound stages from the movie side of the industry. That will be a good thing. And it sounds like they're going at it the right way. I still think what remains to be seen is there a sturdy enough market in Las Vegas to support this kind of attraction, this kind of experience that is so specifically targeted to a haunt theme? I don't know the answer to that. I think there probably is, quite honestly. I think there probably is.
I ran the numbers and we can talk about that in Unhinged.
Great, because we're out of time. For those of you who are done listening, thank you all so much for being part of us. We really appreciate the fact that you do listen to us. For those of you who are part of our Patreon followers with Green Tagged Unhinged, we will get into some deeper stuff and throw off the gloves in that issue coming up very, very shortly. Until next time, on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we'll see you next week.